Hello, welcome everyone to WESC's Uncorked, and we are in for a fabulous conversation. So glad you could join us. We just asked if you could give me a thumbs up, please, in the chat box, just to make sure that you hear me, and we'll just watch for that sign. And while you're doing that, you could also let us know where you're tuning in from. We've got a lot of guests today, and we know you're calling from, or attending rather, from across the province. So thank you very much for that. So welcome. We have a very special guest today. You have heard a lot from her. You've seen her a lot in our community, and she's got a great story to tell. So welcome, Sandra Masters, to Uncorked.
Thank you, Pam.
As we kick it off, I want to say special thanks to our community sponsor, Virtus Group. We can't do things like this without your support, so it's very, very much appreciated. Thank you. And I'm Pam Klein, president of Phoenix Group, proud supporter of WESC. And Sandra, I've sat on that side of the conversation, both here and in Saskatoon, with fabulous Lisa Peters and Shauna Nelson, and we had a great conversation. So I'm honored that I can speak with you today in this chair and have you in that chair.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you so much to WESC for having me, and thanks very much. I feel quite safe here with you.
You'll be very safe. Yeah, there'll be no harsh words. Maybe we'll cry, we'll laugh, all of the above. The session today, our interview rather, is recorded, so you can check it out on Facebook Live as well. And I believe there'll be a recording posted afterwards. And I'm getting a big nod from Josie, so I know I speak the truth. Thank you for that. And there will be time for a Q&A at the end of our conversation. And I ask that you put your questions in the Q&A box, not the chat box. Multitasking through both of those is not my forte, so I'd appreciate the Q&A box. Thank you very much. And now I invite you to all grab a glass of wine as we get uncorked. And we're going to start with Sandra. If you would please give us an introduction, and I just want to brief a few minutes because we are going to, over our next 45 minutes, dive a lot deeper. But if you'd give us your overview, that would be fantastic.
The life of Sandra. I'm a University of Saskatchewan graduate. I have a degree in human resource management and general business, double major actually from College of Commerce. I went to work for Councillors Canada and then into commercial real estate. I went from commercial real estate into commercial mortgage banking, and from there into writing business plans. And now I manage credit for Richardson Pioneer Limited from Western Canada. That's the work side of things. And on the volunteer side of things, it's started off volunteering. I've done gymnastics. I've taken training in coaching volleyball, refereeing, coaching volleyball, hockey Regina. Preschool, we started with a group of parents, and then ultimately ended up at the Regina Exhibition Association Limited as chair of their board of directors. That's what it all culminated in.
Making impact all along the way. Just in that introduction, I feel a little bit like an underachiever. So we are going to dive in now, and yours is a fascinating story, and I really want to share how I first met you. It was a mutual friend of ours, and I got a call, and when he calls, I will certainly answer every single time. And he said, "I have someone you must meet." And I said, "Well, who?" And he said, "Sandra Masters." And I said, "Okay, well, connect us." And it was a great introduction. We've had terrific conversations, certainly excited about the path you're on now, and we look forward to whatever is going to unfold next, and we're ready for more great things from you. So I'm grateful for that introduction. And I wanted to start the conversation with something personal. We heard your great work background, and you're educated. You've built a successful career, clearly a contributor in community, and you've also built a loving family, and you have been a single mother of 4. So through this, in creating this fulfilling, rich life, clearly family matters. So I know the story. So I know each of your children were born at pivotal times in your life, and as well, they tended to create pivots in your life. So would you mind sharing with us those 4 incredible stories?
I did after graduation, high school graduation. I graduated high school from Weyburn, Saskatchewan. And after graduation, I did what a lot of people do. I'll take some time off before I go to university. And I moved to Winnipeg and I worked in a mailroom, then became a bank teller. And I got a call from my boss at the Dairy Queen. And he said, Sandra, we need you to come out to Carlisle. I'd love to tell the story. We just need you to manage it while we have it up for sale. Okay, I'll come manage the Dairy Queen at Carlisle. And so that was 6 months later into Thanksgiving. They had sold it and I moved back into Weyburn. I went, I should probably end up at university, only to discover that I was pregnant. So I was 19 and pregnant, and I had my daughter, my first child, a month after I turned 20. And I thought to myself, well, now you really better go to school. I actually went back to high school when she was 4 months old to upgrade. I didn't have a geo-trig in order to get into College of Commerce. So I went back and I upgraded or got my geo-trig in high school. And I was very popular, I have to tell you, as a 20-year-old student sitting in grade 12 geo-trig class. And I got geo-trig, I applied to the University of Saskatchewan and got in, and I started when my daughter just passed her first birthday. I started university. And so my daughter and I lived together, and I would put her on a toboggan and I would walk to the babysitter, and then I'd hop on the bus, and then I'd go to school, and I'd come back and I'd do the exact same thing. And that's essentially my first year university. And then what happened is in my second year university, what I used to do is, and then by that time I lived with two girlfriends, aunties to my daughter, and I would always have a night class. The way that it would work is I would try to have a class in the morning or two classes in the morning. I'd be gone for a few hours and I would come back, and then I would hang out with my daughter, and then I would go back to school. And I would always have a night class because the aunties would take her, and they would take her swimming, and they would take her to do whatever, watch Beauty and the Beast a lot. And I was taking a night class, and I met my now ex-husband. And a year later, we were engaged, and I had a second child, and I had him in March, just prior to my finals. And I like to tell people that it must have been 50 marks. It was the best marks I had at university. And he was born in the month of March in my third year university. And then I did a fourth, and I had backed off to taking 4 classes per semester. Again, 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. In the meanwhile, I started, my daughter was going to preschool, and there was some discussion about, well, there's a Montessori school, and I believe in early childhood education. I may have been young, but I'm not dumb. And so I investigated that, started her in a Montessori school, which then spun off into probably, 8 years of involvement in the Montessori education system. And I had my son, and then about 9 months later got pregnant after he was born, he was 9 months late, and then I got pregnant again with my third son. And I can remember, the story I was telling Pam was that I was going into my fifth and final year of my undergrad degree, and I had this great, amazing, it was a negotiations class for 4th year in industrial relations, union management negotiations. And it was the first class I sat in. It was a round table, and there was only about 18 of us in there, and I was massively pregnant. Like, I'm 9 months pregnant. He was born September 21st, and this is September 5th or 6th. And I got there before the teacher did, so we're all sitting around, and I'm directly across from him, and he's busy telling us that, well, he said, you have to attend and you have to engage. There's only 18 of us in this classroom. You have to attend and you have to engage. If you miss any classes, you're gonna get knocked off marks. And I'm like, okay. And so then he said, come up and talk to me after class. And it was September 5th, and my due date was at the end of the month. And I was lined up behind some of my classmates, and we were just waiting our turn to talk to him at the end of this class to make arrangements for whatever. And I just needed to let him know I was pregnant and might miss a class. So he had turned his back on me, and he turned back around, and the look on his face when he saw me massively pregnant was like, he kind of did this, and I said, don't worry, sir, it's not yours. And then he started laughing, and I said, I'm just going to tell you that I'm going to miss a class or two. And he burst out laughing, and he said, come on. And I said, no, I'll just miss a class or two. And I missed one. I had my class on Thursday. I was in labor, I had a baby, and I went back. I missed the Tuesday. I went back to the Thursday and had a newborn baby that, just had my husband come with my baby, wait out in the hall, and I'll come attend this class. I only took 3 classes that semester, 1 each day and 1 night class, and it just sort of worked out. My mom and dad at that point in time had moved to Saskatoon, so I was able to drop my kids with my mom and dad and then just come back and nurse and do that kind of thing. So that's baby number 3. And then a year later, I had graduated. I was working for Kellogg's Canada as a Northern retail rep, which meant I was driving around to places like Meadow Lake and PA and North Battleford, going into grocery stores, and you're just negotiating to try and market your brand post General Mills was the enemy. And you would try and come up with creative solutions for how to get your brand marketed a bit better. And found out I was pregnant, and they called and said, hey, we want to offer you a permanent position. I said, well, I'm not going to be on the road anymore because I'm pregnant again with my youngest. Then I ended up entering into commercial real estate sort of at that transition time. And again, it's a hilarious story if you want to talk about, men as your employers. I was one of the moms from the Montessori school. We're sitting in gymnastics, and my daughter was a competitive gymnast, provincial gymnast. We're sitting watching, and nobody knows I'm pregnant with my 4th child. And she says, what are you doing right now? And I said, I'm working for Kellogg's Canada. And she says, you should come do what I do. And I said, well, that'd be a great idea. What do you do? And so she talks about commercial real estate. And she says, the guys keep asking, me to go interview because they want to hire another female agent. She's the only female agent in the city at that time, and specifically to commercial. And so I said, okay. So I went for an interview, and the partners loved me. And then I came back. I said, let me know if you want to talk to me again. They came back, and the second time was like, we'd really love to offer you. So they were offering me a job. And I said, well, the difficulty is that I'm 4 months pregnant with my 4th child. So I'm just going to give you a minute to think about whether or not you think I can still do the job. And then they were a little gobsmacked, and they said, well, no, can you make it work? I said, I can make it work. I said, that's what I do. I make it work. And so I ended up getting hired there, and I used to bring my baby in at 3 months old or 4 months old. I would take him into the office because what I did at the time was a lot of research. And in fact, what I ended up doing, even while I was pregnant, was I did a downtown survey where I went and measured every retail office main floor space for the square footage. And I went in and talked to every single office or retail business owner and asked them about the challenges and opportunities that existed in downtown Saskatoon. And that was my first year of commercial real estate. So then there I was, 27 years old. I had a degree and 4 kids.
And already a great working track record. I love that. And I love when you said that I only took 3 classes. I think 4 was the max load. So clearly you were a high achiever, and with that, beautiful babies, beautiful children, and I call them those unanticipated opportunities, not the births, but the jobs that came along your way, and you're just able to call as it is and see what was going to happen. And certainly with our young and even established entrepreneurs, parenthood is often a big question. It's not always, and a challenge. And how do you manage? And through your stories, I picked up a lot that there was your community, whether it was your family, whether it was your friends, whether it was that boss, whether it was that prof that carried you along the way. Was there anyone in particular that stands out for you with maybe that role that inspired you, that buoyed you, that has pushed you from then or even today? That one person just go, wow.
I don't remember an individual necessarily. My mom and dad, and probably my dad more so in some respects, because by the time I was having children, he had retired. My dad was 40 years old when I came along. And he would just look at my mom and say, we're going to take care of her babies, like that we're going to babysit for her. It was my dad's decision, not even my mom's, which was kind of fascinating. My mom, of course, was the primary caregiver, in terms of tending home and whatnot. But in a lot of ways, it was my dad who, I used to have arguments with my dad when I was a little girl or a teenager, because my brothers had to take out the garbage, but I had to do dishes and vacuum. And I just found that, once a week taking out the garbage and I had to this didn't make any sense. And we would have a heart to heart about it. And he said, you're not wrong, Sandra. He said, but your mom needs the help, and I'd really appreciate it if you would help her. So you win the argument, but you kind of lose the war. And so, but he also told me at the same time, and he was born in 1930, he comes from a generation where women served a role. And he just said, you're the smartest one of my kids, you can do anything you want. And then he was always there. They sold their house and moved to Saskatoon to help care for my kids. That was their retirement, was just hanging out with my babies. I would tell you that it's probably the birth of my daughter, because your sense of responsibility. So you're 20 years old, you're not dumb, you work hard. And so if I started a job, I would end up in a job. And I knew at the time that if I didn't get an education, I was going to be a really smart something, not career necessarily oriented. Because even at the time, it was gearing towards, if you didn't have a degree, it was hard unless you were going to start a business. And my hat's off to people who start businesses, because it terrifies me. And probably because that sense of security, I needed that. And so I would go home to her every day and we would do our homework together. She would color and I would do papers. And so a lot of it was that. And my friends, it just was sort of natural to them that this would happen. My closest friends didn't have babies until their 30s. So my daughter was already 10 years of age. And so they'd joke around that their 20s existed. They had fun and then they had, got to be auntie. And that's really, and then I think because when you show up and you perform and you work hard, that's what I tell my kids, show up and work hard. That's what you got to do. And I would always have bosses going, I don't know how you do this, but okay, you keep doing it. And then over and over again, that would happen actually.
Oh, it's a great example. And I hope your daughter, actually all four of your kids, know that influence that they had on you as you built that career. And I think there's terrifying moments for everyone, whether you have a career working for someone or you are an entrepreneur. I think it's across the board that how can I do it all? I will, because I have the will, and clearly you have that will. Question for you, another one. Excluding the current mayoral race, I'm sure it's interesting and challenging on many fronts. What is a career experience where you were stretched? I mean, really stretched, where it gave you reason to pause and maybe think this experience has changed my life, or it will change my life. It's maybe changed how I see myself, and it might actually change the direction I'm going to take. Something that was.
I think one of the jobs that I had when I was doing commercial, when I was doing commercial real estate, kind of the upside of one was, I'm pregnant, I'm doing my downtown survey, and I had gone to Winnipeg to visit with my biological mother at the time, and I came back and I said, I don't know why we don't have one of these bookstores, these independent bookstores here. And my two bosses looked at me and goes, what are you talking about? I said, well, there's this bookstore in Winnipeg and it's fabulous. It's, it's a kids section. I go there all the time. It's an event for my children. And they just stared at me and they said, call him. And I said, what? And they said, well, just call him. You want me just to call the owner of the bookstore? And they said, yeah. I'm like, okay. So it didn't occur to me. There you go, 27. And I called him. And by sheer coincidence, you talk about so many degrees of separation in life. It just so happened that the owner of the bookstore, which is McNally Robinson Booksellers, had given a child up for adoption. And he had asked me, have you been in my store? And when I had answered him on the cold call, I said, yeah, I just answered, my biological mother lives there. And that's what intrigued him. That's actually the connection that he made with me, just because I shared that. And 2 years later, that shop opened up and we moved something like 20-some thousand square feet of office space out, and planted and then put that in there. And that was always, my kids were older and they would talk about going to Saskatoon, how much they loved the bookstore. I said, yeah, I did that deal. And then, what, Mom? And I'm like, no, I did that deal. And then if you fast forward, probably what amounts to 10 years later, you end up when you become good at something and you sort of start to churn, become very adept at things, you almost can treat yourself like a machine, I guess would be the way to say it. This is the downside of it, where you're so good at doing things and you're so adept because of the experience or just the volume of work that you're doing, that you end up kind of burning yourself out. Like you lose the joy in what you're doing because you do become mechanical in a way. And I lost my best friend to brain cancer. And at the time there was I don't know if you all remember it, but in 2008, there was a huge commercial mortgage real estate financial crash. Yeah, that one. Leading into that, you could kind of feel it, like in commercial mortgage financing, you could feel it kind of in the system. It's hard to explain, but we syndicated loans and whatnot. And you could feel it coming. And there was just a volume that I was operating at. And then she had been diagnosed the previous year, but she was passing away. And when she finally passed away, I had this moment where I'm like, you know what? Like I could have taken 3 months off and it wouldn't have been the end of the world. And so you're not getting joy from your work and you miss out on those things. And that was another moment where I'm done. And I gave my resignation the following Monday. And I gave a 4-month resignation because, I had a volume of a book of business, but I went, I'm out. That was kind of, one of those other, it was the downside of the switch. Yeah.
And it's recognizing the importance of that to take action. That is really a values-based decision and clearly one that you remember for a very long time.
Very much.
And the story I actually had to, I'm so glad you shared it, McNally Robinson's story, because it is another, when we hear a lot in business and establishing our businesses about either our personal brand or what is our brand story, what are our values? And that story is so profound because he didn't have the endorsement of his wife necessarily in that story, but that personal story of his and your personal story facilitated a pretty poignant business deal in Saskatchewan's fabric.
And to explain him a little bit, so it's Paul McNally and it's Holly Robinson, McNally Robinson, and he is fierce. Like he's an academic and he's incredibly intelligent and a fierce businessman and kind of abrupt on the phone, and I'm cold calling, feeling a little bit like a dum-dum. And when he flew into Saskatoon, he said, I don't want to meet with anybody else, I'll go for a drive with you. Like, he just didn't like people kind of picking at him. So we'd go for a drive and it was completely conversational. And those were the questions he was asking me about. It was that personal, like where you just never know when you're going to come across them, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're, I think if you're open and you're willing to talk about things and share pieces of yourself that aren't scripted, just to be natural, you end up connecting with people.
That's a fabulous story. That was a great deal that you made. So we have, as you're well aware, we have many entrepreneurs, business people who are participating in this Zoom session today. What are 3 things you do or have done that you feel have contributed to your success? And I know there's lots, but there's those things that are, you're okay. If I do this, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be okay.
I think like a lot of people, I don't like to show up and not know how to do things. And so I have it's almost fanatical, my desire to research and understand and ask questions. I get invited along on, we do road trips or stuff with work. The joke becomes, okay, Sandra, you got to sit in the back seat, and I'm the 4-year-old in the back seat going, but why? But why do we do it that way? Have we thought about doing it another way? But, because you're always digging down into why do people behave the way they behave? Why do businesses make the decisions they make? And from a work capacity, you start to, because if you can start to conceptualize sort of how things work and how they ended up kind of in that direction or working a certain way. And that's how process improvements happen. So I personally dig down almost fanatically into the research, and it's between interviewing and reading and digging into numbers. That's one of the things I do constantly. So the second thing that I do is I put a lot of hours in, and but that gets me comfortable because I like to be a subject matter expert if I'm going to participate in something. So I like to do that. And I like to talk to people. Like, I call it interviewing people, they might call it conversation. But that's what you're always asking them, like, how do you do what you do? And why do you do what you do? And I find that you'll end up, people sometimes don't know their answers to their own story. Like, it's fascinating to me because then they go, oh, I don't know why I do it that way. And you can kind of create hiccups and disrupt things in really positive ways. I haven't had a lot of negative experiences with that. I should maybe be careful, actually. It's been mostly positive.
Actually, there's been a lot of conversation over the last couple of weeks.
There has.
And of those 2 that you mentioned too, in one of your earlier stories, you mentioned that's what you say to your son and you say to your kids, and that's what I find. What I do for hard work or whatever I do in life for my values are what you share in life. It is intrinsic to who you are and to your success. So if we fast forward and whatever should happen, should the election be in your favor or not, would any of those 3 change, or do you feel you'd add to the mix or change?
I don't think they change. I think it is just fundamental to who I am. What would be added, I think, is probably more of the people element. There was a period of time, and I'll use that example I gave you when my best friend passed away, where you sort of pull back, like where you've been in a situation where it's constant contact with people and constant where you pull back and go, and at that time I focused on my kids very much, and it turns out they all grow up and move away. So I don't have piles of laundry to do anymore, the same. So I think that's a natural. I think what's shifted for me is that focus back into people. Actually, I think that's probably win, lose, or draw. Like, that'll be the thing going forward that I probably participate more in with people.
And I'm I'm so sorry to hear the loss of your friend, and we have experienced things like that when it leaves that profound mark, that the most salient point is the people that matter most, and that you carry that forward is what is it about anybody you meet that you can find that quality, that piece, the element that matters of their story and their being. So yeah, I know you will, I'm very confident rather that you will carry many of the stories that you've been hearing on the election path with you for a long time to come. And one thing I wanted to ask you, it kind of builds on what we were chatting about, is I read an interesting quote from Jacinda Ardern today, who won like a landslide election as New Zealand's Prime Minister, and she commented today that elections aren't always great for bringing people together, but they also don't need to tear everyone apart. And I thought that was profound in the political climate that we live in the global chaos that we're amidst. And you are certainly stepping up for public service, for running for office. It is not for the faint of heart. And standing for vision, you are setting an exceptional example. And certainly for women, because we're often underrepresented in leadership roles and certainly in the political arena. But I think for people in general, it's important that we see diversity represented in our communities, whether it be in office or whether it is in communicating and connecting. So one of the things I was really curious for you, and the success we've heard from you and the life that you lead, why now and why does it matter?
Why now? There's an evolution in my personal story, which means that, as I said, my children are grown and most of them have moved away. And so I still have that same burning energy and desire to participate in things. And so there's the very personal element of it, which is I feel I have the time and the energy. The other thing is that I don't like that feeling of stagnancy. Like my kids moving away and not being proud of being from the city of Regina really bugs me. And to say that I get told, well, this city is so much better because of this, so this city is so much better than because of this, because we're awesome. And I firmly believe that. Like when you volunteer for anything within your community, you get that sense of community and how great things can be. So those things kind of marry up, my energy and that status quo combining. Why now? I actually have to tell you the truth that I had an older gentleman tell me that he thought my being female was a real benefit in running for office. Then I looked at him, I said, never in my lifetime did I think I would hear those words. But there's this shift in that acknowledgement that a whole bunch of people before us have pushed to say that representation is important and it's a different voice. In terms of elections tearing people apart, I struggle with sometimes actually keeping my mouth shut because I have a very sarcastic sense of humor. And so I have to watch that because it can be perceived as mean and I don't want to be perceived. You know, it's intended as fun privately. You sit around and you joke around and you're sarcastic. And so I pull that back a little bit. But I think people understanding that we can agree to disagree on things. You can think that, oh, this person is really open-minded and smart and coming from a good place. And so I may not align 100%, but I mostly align. And I think that when you can have disagreement and you can have open discussions with people, that's where the best decisions get made. Oh, I didn't look at it that way. I look at it this way. When I go back to who I am in the backseat of that car, being the 4-year-old with why, when you're constantly doing that, you're either challenging someone else or you're challenging yourself to understand, to get to a place where let's explain, help me understand, or get them to articulate so that they understand where they're coming from, which could just be instinctive and reactive. And that's the negative. That's the whole, well, I don't agree with them on this issue, so let's burn it all down. Like it's that element to it, which that's the most distressing part about an election to me, which is we cannot agree on everything, but we can understand that we're both trying to get the same place.
I've heard, I ran for office once. I ran for school board on the East Coast, and I was far too immature, and somebody convinced me to do it. But I did learn a lot from that you do have to be prepared. You have to know what you stand for. You have to know what your voice is. and you have to know what your vision is, and that there can be civilized debate. And I think that's what's important, so that when you conclude the conversation or wrap up the argument, that you can still have a conversation.
Yeah.
You know, it's not filled with the animosity and incivility that we often see. So, and I think that's great in Canada. We see that, particularly even in Saskatchewan, we see that more civil conversation in debate and politicalization. What do you think? Are we different?
I think so, actually. If you measure us against, if you've ever watched any of the other provincial or even some of them speak, we come across as proud and humble for the most part. Don't take advantage of us, because you'll get our back up. But yeah, I actually think that I've had the benefit on the campaign team even of having across the ideological spectrum people involved in the campaign, and it's kind of amazing to see them at the table together teasing each other, but they're teasing each other and they just understand they come at it from different perspectives. Yeah.
Well, we're a small community. You're gonna run into them.
Yes, sure.
How do you want to be
Yes.
greeted?
How do you want to be greeted? That's
when you are not in public.
There's not a lot of us. Maybe that's the answer.
Something else I wanted to touch on you is, as you were building your career and your education, and then you were taking opportunities, what did you look for in that next step? Like, you've been in finance, in real estate, in retail, all along the way. What is it that drives you in career?
Sometimes it's fear, it's stability. Going from commercial real estate into commercial banking, it became a matter of I became single in that period of time. And so when I made that leap, part of it was, okay, so if it's just me supporting 4 kids, it's a benefit package to pay for braces would be a fantastic thing. Like, it was a very practical decision, and there's nothing wrong with that. And it still was in my field. I mean, I was recruited out because I was in the field. And so you got to continue doing what you kind of love to be participating in, but a little bit more stability and security. And then you make the leap the other way, which is, I'm going to go do some freelance, just do some consulting work, however you want to call it, in terms of building up business plans for new businesses. And it's a huge leap. Like, it's those things make me fearful, but when you develop expertise in things, that's where the comfort comes in. So it's kind of the flip, which is when you start something new, the security is nice, but when you're really an expert at it, I feel you can take the risk. So that's kind of how I've approached those 2 things throughout my life.
Well, I see you as a calculated risk taker, and they work out because you're smart. That's the history I see in you. Another question that I wanted to ask you is around leadership. We talked about the values that matter to you, and what the 3 things that you do that you are reflective of your success. What would be a leadership quality that you've seen in someone that you've worked alongside, or that you pride in yourself? When you look at leading a city, community is a big role. What do you think the leadership quality is that you most admire?
I think the ability to bring people together of divergent views. I think the ability to get to know people, understand where they're coming from, and give them a voice. Like, if you have a more powerful voice, you should give others a voice. And in this situation, it doesn't matter if it's council, or if it's citizenry, or if it's administration, that you're able to understand where people are coming from. Again, you can agree or disagree, but make room for their voice to be heard. I firmly believe that's half the battle, is people, when they participate in something, want to be addressed, acknowledged, and what they bring to the table utilized in some way. So it's that building that consensus and engaging with people. The flip side of it is you have to be fiercely protective. And if you're going to participate in something, or you're my friend, or you're on my team, or you're on my board, or I will be fiercely protective. And I had it explained to me once, which you might get the tar taken off you, but what were you doing? But the forward facing is, here's what happened. You take the heat when things are bad, and then you allow others to take the credit for their ideas and their participation. That's hugely important. Because that's really, I always compare things to raising kids, but that really is what raising kids is about too, right? You keep them alive, and then you allow them to thrive. you don't get credit for that. That's theirs, right? Like they do that, but you're just the support underneath that elevates and lifts them up.
Great trait. I always remember the quote, and I think it's from Maya Angelou, and she said, people will remember not what you taught them, particularly referring to the education field. They won't remember necessarily what you taught them, but they will always remember how you made them feel. You know, part of that is, did we feel success or did I feel defeated? You know, what was that leadership quality that you exemplified? So we're going to shortly open it up to some questions from our guests. But before we do that, I want to throw out a couple quick, fun, light questions for you. And the first one is, I want you to all understand, when you hear Sandra's story in its entirety, it is enriching, it's rewarding. There are elements of heartbreak and hardship, and truly, truly great resilience. So to me, it's the makings of a fabulous movie. So in the movie of Sandra Masters, who do you want to play you?
Sandra Bullock.
Well, I couldn't even get your last name out. And why? Quick why?
Because she's funny and she's smart and she's, she just is, you know, if you've ever heard her talk about her kids, her adopted kids, like she's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that would be great casting.
No.
And another
sort of self-serving at the same time.
Another quality in leadership and through the race and in life is humor, and you indeed have a great sense of humor, and you called it a sarcastic twist. I think it's savvy, smart humor.
I'll go with that. I'm going to dump that.
If there was one adjective that you could use to describe yourself, your life, what would that adjective be? Take your time. We don't have a sand.
I always think about it I always think about it in terms of a song, right? It's tub thumping. You got knocked down, you get back up again. Yeah, you're never going to keep that one is you just keep getting back up and going back at it. You know, you have those moments where you didn't think you'd ever be in that situation, or what do I do now? How do I, like, literally where you're defeated sitting on the floor. And, you know, everybody has those moments where the car breaks down and the water heater bottom falls out, and then somebody, you know, your kids are on the monkey bars and they're on the bottom of the pile that falls, and so his arm is broken, and that's one day, right? And so you know, that's actually a reasonable day, because that's easily, there's nothing traumatizing about any of that. But those kind of days where you're like, you know, you feel defeated, and that ability to kind of laugh at yourself a little bit and shake it off and keep going. Because at the end of the day, I'm tucking 4 healthy kids into bed and we're good.
You're together.
Yeah.
And you're safe.
Yes.
Fabulous. And if you could have dinner with someone, who would that be? Why them? And what would you ask them? So I know I was going to ask you 3, but that's a 3 in 1. So we actually ended up with 5 questions, but just doing the math.
Right now, with who's alive today, it would have to be Michelle Obama. And I think in terms of an exemplary leadership role that she took on unelected in a way. And I would like to see if she's as funny as I think she is, but she is principled and she's fierce and just has an enormous abundance of compassion for people, which is kind of like to be around that, because hopefully that continues to rub off on you. Right?
Yeah, indeed infectious.
Yes.
Yeah, she'd be a great dinner companion. I had the opportunity to see her speak, and it was great. So someone who is not living.
Oh, someone who is not living. I might take Maya Angelou, actually. You talked about her earlier. It's funny because Oprah is not on afternoons anymore. And so I grew up parenting in the age of where Oprah was on in the afternoon. Not that I was at home a lot, I'm just saying she was on. And I can remember watching Maya Angelou have these moments where, and I would have had at least 3 of my kids. And Maya Angelou was on Oprah Winfrey. And Oprah was talking to Maya about, you know, what have you learned as a parent, or what have you learned? And she said, I learned that whenever someone you care about walks in a room, your face should light up like you care about them. And so when your child walks in the room and you're busy with supper and you've got bills to pay and you're busy, that when your child walks in the room, that you turn and just that your face should light up, because that's the communication they'll remember. And it stuck with me the whole time. Like, your facial expression should show your children how excited you are to see them. And so you could appreciate that I was really busy. I had a career, I had the kids, I was driving everywhere. And so it was always to be excited to see the people you care about.
Yeah, I would love to have dinner with you too.
Oh,
Yeah,
she
one
knows
speaker
things.
I have not heard is her, and yeah.
And you know, in her lifetime, she saw some nonsense, right? Like, she saw some nonsense and worse. And so, yeah, to hear some of her story would be amazing.
Hey, we are going to turn to some questions, and I'm going to start with Eric Dillon. Hi, Eric. He is a fabulous supporter of entrepreneurs, period, but in particular with growing the initiatives that West has underway. So Eric's question is, what's the best way in which we can support new high-growth companies being born in our city? And what can the city of Regina do to support the growth of our entrepreneurial ecosystem?
That's a great question, Eric. I had a crazy idea, actually, that when the city, for example, a really practical way would be when the city is doing RFPs. I have a sister-in-law who's in innovation. She has a not-for-profit innovation company. And she would tell me that, you know, in terms of tech, for example, that we're missing developers in town. And I said, this doesn't make any sense. We can't hire them because they need experience. So then I met with somebody at the cultivator, and I was asking him, a young entrepreneur, I go, what do you need? And he said, well, you need about 16 months worth of experience. So then I went, well, the city is doing RFPs all the time. And as I understand it, we have to hire oftentimes outside the city in order to get that development experience. Why wouldn't you, for the nominal amount of money it is, require an incorporation of maybe fourth-year students, so you could end up garnering them some of that experience that they're going to need in order to launch, and you know, for a nominal amount of money. So you're supporting the university, you're partnering with the university, but then you're also going to feed into something like the cultivator with individuals who have garnered experience on kind of with experts in the field, which are clearly going to work for the city of Regina. So that's one idea. High growth companies. Part of high growth companies in our city would be making sure that the city isn't getting in the way of either resources or processes that they need in order to be successful and to be high growth. And that's everything from permitting and planning, but also in terms of if there's something the city can do to advocate for the resources required, that would seem to make a ton of sense to me as well. And I go back all the time to building relationships with the province and the feds, because oftentimes if the city doesn't have the resources from a financial perspective, there is opportunity. The province wants us to be successful. We know that. They want the jobs to be here. So all of those elements are, you continue to work and make those connections.
And there's great opportunity in our city.
Oh, it's a fantastic opportunity. It really is a great place to live. People choose to live here.
That's right.
I keep telling my kids that.
Okay, we have another question, and it's from Leah Hubick. And the segue to this is that data is so important to understanding our community needs. And I appreciated your comments on research and your innovative nature. Further engaging voices. There are so many community organizations who are not often constructively engaged in submitting information to the city. How can you best capture the data as mayor in enhancing our community?
That's a great question. I had a meeting a couple of weeks ago about this from a gentleman who we were kind of nerding out about this. What I know is that the UK about 10 years ago went kind of with the digital first program. So anybody accessing a community program or a social program, their data was starting to be captured in the system. And 10 years later, they have this incredible database for what programs work and what programs don't. And I think maybe there's something to that in terms of creating a data first program for community organizations. Number one, they all have to be identified, and there's a coordination, a collaboration that's needed. But if the people using the services started to be able, where there's an ease of use from a digital perspective, like it was one application and then we were able to track them across. My understanding is some of the limitations to this have been the privacy laws. But I would think if the UK can get around it, and we have hub and core programs with, policing units and social services and education, that we should be able to figure out a way to develop a digital program that starts to capture all of that, where people entering in and utilizing those systems are shared, and you can start to work off dashboards so that 2, 3, 4 years down the road, you can actually start to track, for example, kids using programs, children entering into programs. We can start to track what's working and what's not working so that we can target some of the, I think it's $2 billion in social program spending in the province. You can start to target that for the programs that are working and maybe stop some of the duplication of services. Sometimes people are replicating themselves because of need, and sometimes it is a bit of a duplication. We should be coordinating that, and I think it has to be through a digital data kind of conceptual programming. And I think the city actually should establish that.
Actually, Leah has a second part of the question that kind of builds on that, is what can city councillors be doing to help fuel that collection of data and do something with the information?
I think it's along the same line, and I go back to that building consensus amongst your leadership team. If that's the vision, if we say in 10 years from now we want 10 years worth of data, or 8 years worth of data because it might take us a year or two to build that up, and we have individuals in the city that can build these programs, where I think across the board, I was able to develop a relationship with all the existing councillors, and I can tell you that they're all coming at it from a place of they want what's best for the city. And so I believe that data is the answer to a lot of things, or it's the key to the answer. So I think you get support. I firmly believe we'd have support for something like that in the city of Regina.
And see, it's so accessible.
Yes. We kind of get in our own way, or we choose not to measure it, and I can't figure it out. Like if it just makes people uncomfortable or what it is, but I think there's something there. And I think we could collaborate with the province, because I think that's, right now it's incredibly difficult if someone is home insecure or food insecure or addicted or has mental health issues or all of the above. They have to go into every single different system, and it's an application. And so it seems to me that trying to do it digital first, where you entered into one portal and then the programs were assigned to you as opposed to the other way around, you're just going to get better data. You're going to get more efficient use of those services, more effective use of the services.
And it's changing dynamically.
It is.
Terrific question. And we have another question. Hi, Linda Allen Hardesty. Thank you for joining us. Her comment is, I appreciate your comments about how to bring people's diverse perspective together. What thoughts do you have to bring all of our fantastic diverse perspectives together to create a vision for Regina?
Linda, I don't mind the vision of Regina. The vision of Regina is to be the most sustainable, beautiful, sustainable, inclusive, vibrant city in Canada, living in harmony. And I like that first part. I don't think we have set strategies to achieve those things. I think, I believe in subject matter experts is what I believe in. I believe that the more diverse voices that you collect, and so I'm a big fan of public engagement. It takes work. It talks about connecting with people that you might not meet every day and might not want to talk to every day. But I think if city and councillors went out and held everything from open houses to surveys to whatever, we could probably collect a whole bunch of data that way. I'm going back to data. I can tell you that if I've talked to hundreds of people in the last 2 months, there is an incredibly common theme that weaves its way through the city of Regina. We are not that far apart, and I think we all want very, very similar things for our city.
I'm going to be very frank in this question. When you said you were running, and I heard from lots of people, as my friend said to me, you must meet Sandra Masters. Same breath, well, who is Sandra Masters? And there was so much curiosity rather around you, and you have built so quickly, for those that didn't know your already established history of success, a presence and a position and a stance. What is the role of social media played for for you in this?
I think social media gives the voice, and actually, it gives that communication method, which would be almost impossible in any other venue at this point in time. Because I think you're always depending upon radio or TV or newspaper, and you still depend upon those things to reach the masses. But in terms of the ability to voice and to watch, now you can record and people can hear and see me talk, and there's probably a consistency, and maybe I should apologize for all the videos, but that's what my team tells me I need to do.
No,
but you're thinking
right
that's
on.
what you need to do. But it's actually that ability to have a voice and to communicate with people and to be accessible in large part, which is not always entirely comfortable. I'm going to be honest, but it's remarkable amount of positivity in terms of feedback. And I'll say it again, even if someone disagrees with you, like you can disagree with me, I'll take my position and we'll have a debate.
Isn't it better to know what somebody thinks than not?
Yes.
Like it or
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, you're a strong social presence, and you're good at it. So I don't know what the likes are, but I'm sure it's growing. And we are a very small group in Path Co-work in Regina. And I just want to throw it out, if any of our participants in the room, we're fortunate to be here face to face, have any questions. And we're so fortunate that Prabha Mitchell, CEO of WESC, is here. And we've got the team. And
well, so Sandra, thank you for being here this evening. And I guess I would ask a question on behalf of our stakeholders here in Saskatchewan, and in Regina in particular, is so we, pre-COVID, we spent a lot of time talking about supporting women entrepreneurs scale their business. And that reality shifted fairly quickly. We've done some work around that. And do you have a couple of tactics or strategies that you would employ to help us get there? How do we get out of this reality, and how do we support women entrepreneurs get back to scaling?
When you're talking about coming out of COVID in its entirety. Yeah, I think probably that's on the books for at least the next year or two in terms of a COVID recovery. But one of the tactics we were talking about in terms of sort of the campaign team when we were brainstorming about it, like how do you do this? Well, part of it is there's an entrepreneurial plan that's already built and you target it towards female. You should probably fund it in order to allow space and room for those things to grow. I'd be interested, I'm going to come back, my general sense of curiosity is what's in the way of it right now? Is it COVID restrictions? Is it a lack of funding? Is it a lack of voice? So once you can understand what's getting in the way, you can start to clear the path a little bit.
And it's the barriers that women entrepreneurs face that are unique, right? So women and men start businesses at the same rate, but women-owned businesses don't scale to the same magnitude, and those unique barriers need to be addressed. But with COVID, those barriers have been compounded. So it's about how can we build a strategy to advance what we were working on before.
Okay, aside from financing, because I think financing is a barrier women experience at a rate more than men, what else is in your way?
Barriers, so access to financing, access to capital, access to mentors, access to networks. And oftentimes, a fourth reason, not cited enough, but we know exists, is the balancing family responsibilities with the demands of growing your business. Childcare support.
Childcare. I think there's probably an opportunity coming out of COVID, or is a plan to come out of COVID. And we had this idea that by the end of Q1, you should probably bring businesses in. But it's about, I think your mayor should be your connector. And I think there should be advocacy and giving a voice to some of those concerns, because I think we have a lot of investment money here in the city that could be put to proper use. And it just needs to be directed, right? It just needs that voice and needs to be directed. In terms of mentorship, we have some pretty amazing companies here. I always find that people in Regina answer the call, right? We have amazing volunteers. We have amazing business leaders who answer the call, and you got to make the call, right? I actually believe it's probably far easier than even we might feel right now in terms of this is a particular sector which is important that we grow and clear things out of their way.
Thank you for that. We have time for one more question, and it is coming from Jan Hansen, I believe. Sorry if I've got your last name wrong, it's my eyesight. Based on your past experience and studies, what do women bring to governance that may be lacking when governance is not equitable, and how do we all benefit?
What do women bring to governance? I don't think there's one thing that fits all, but I would suggest that our ability to be relatable and to listen and collect people's stories. I think you bring that to, I think at the governance table or at the board table or at, a council table, I think your ability to stop and listen and collect data and collect stories probably is going to make better decisions. But there's an element to governance which is very processed and principled in approach. And so when you think about it, governance in terms of oversight and that ability to be forward looking and to set vision and to set strategy and to set those goals, I think women bring a tenacity that we don't get easily distracted, to be honest. It's been my experience that you time out and you go, okay, wait a minute, where are we going? Wait a minute, where are we going? Because it's easy to get distracted by squirrels and rabbit holes. And women have a tendency to sit back and go, and where are we going? You're always looking at the big picture of how's my next day and my next week and my next year gonna go. That's been my experience at the board table anyways.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
Asking questions.
Yeah.
We don't know all the answers, so we have to ask.
Yeah.
So.
And we're open to asking. We're open to showing that we don't have all the answers. Yeah.
Well, you got all the answers today. Thank you so much, Sandra, for spending time with all of us. And we wish you energy and fun and safety in the next few weeks of the campaign trail that you're on. And thank you very much for stepping up and being a voice. And we just ask that everybody votes on November 6th. So thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Our
And
pleasure.
you were great.
Well,
You can do this full time.
Thank you very much. So a couple things as
She's
we
gonna be moonlighting.
Yeah.
as we wrap up. You can register for all WESC events at wesc.ca/events, and there is another upcoming Uncorked, which will be November 17th, and it's with Amy Schulhauser, who is simply wonderful. She's a successful entrepreneur. She's built many businesses. She's an accomplished chef. She's a community advocate, volunteer, teacher, WESC board member, supporter, all-round fabulous woman. And she will be having a conversation with Janet Lee, who I could go on at length at how fabulous she is too. WESC surrounds themselves with really strong and smart women. And another fun fact about Amy is she taught me how to dice an onion without getting cut or crying, and making the best panna cotta. So she is great, and it'll be a fantastic interview. And you can register for free, just like this one. And again, we'd really like to thank our community sponsor, Virtus, who is always there for WESC and our community. So thank you very much. And an extra thanks to Josie Breeze, who manages these events effortlessly and make sure we have all the details that we need, and Prava and the WESC team that really works so hard to really equip us all for success, whatever our business endeavor is, and how we need to learn and succeed. So thank you all very much, and to all of you for tuning in. It was great to have you here. Thanks so much. Good night.